The wise man cannot hate. The wise man treats an evil mind, a sick mind, as one treats a sick body. You do not harbor ill will towards someone who is sick. You pity them, and the wise man views the sick mind in the same way. He believes it is better to be harmed than to do harm. He believes the wrongdoer is far worse off than the person who was wronged. And that's sound philosophy. And when you realize that no soul is willingly deprived of the truth, no one does wrong knowingly, then you can no longer hold any ill will towards another. Because just like you, all that they are doing is what they believe is best. That's all anyone can do. That's all anyone ever does. I don't believe anyone weighs two options and they clearly, without a doubt, know that number two is the best option and they go with number one. Nobody ever does this. And you may be thinking about the times you yourself don't do what you know is best, don't do what you know you should do. And my explanation for that is in that moment in time, you believe satisfying your urge or obtaining that pleasure that number one offers is better than waiting and obtaining the true good, the true pleasure that number two offers. In the present moment, you lose the foresight of the future and you let the present moment take you over and you give in to your lower animal self. And that's why people do things that they know isn't best. Because they truly think it is best in the moment. People all the time say, I can't bear this anymore. I must do it. I must give in. People go on diets, and when they get hungry, they eat a bunch of food. In the moment, they know they shouldn't, but they believe satisfying the urge or satisfying their discomfort to not be uncomfortable anymore is worth sacrificing the future pleasure of losing weight, obtaining their goal, and being healthier. We get blinded in the present moment. And the wise man understands this. And the wise man uses foresight to realize that pleasure is fleeting. How quick the pleasure lasts, but how long the dishonor lasts from giving in to the pleasure that you told yourself you weren't going to give into. This is not how one comes to love themselves. You need to have a good conscience. You need to be a person who keeps their word to themselves. Because if you can't even keep your word to yourself, why do you expect anyone to keep their word to you? If you made plans with a friend to go out to eat and you always canceled on them, they soon enough would stop making plans with you or would just say no when you asked. And that's what you do to yourself. And we all love ourselves more than other people. It is human nature to love yourself more than others. It's not selfish. It's like when you're on an airplane and they say when the mask drops, put yours on first. Quote unquote, do a selfish action. because you can't help anyone else if you pass out. If you go to help your kid before you put your own mask on, then maybe you help them, maybe you don't. But if you end up dying in the process, it's selfish if you think about it, because now your kid is left without a parent because you didn't trust them to put their mask on properly and you felt the need to help them. And it's weird because selfishness it's a weird thing. But that's another rabbit hole that I don't really want to get down right now. I want to focus that the wise man cannot hate. And like I said, no soul is willingly deprived of the truth comes to us from Plato. And I believe Plato was right. Because every human just wants to do what is best. What does every human being want? Happiness. Everyone just wants to be happy. So why would anyone take an action that will not make them happy? No one does. Nobody does, even though that's hard to see sometimes. But people are deprived of the truth that you have. And hate is not the answer. Pity is the answer. Or no judgment at all. I think no judgment is better than pity, but pity is better than hate. And just as you wouldn't hate someone who has cancer, you shouldn't hate somebody who is deprived of the truth, for they are misguided in matters of utmost importance, which is sadder than a sick body. It's sadder for the mind to be sick than for the body to be sick. But no one acts like this. Nobody sees someone who commits a crime and feels pity for them. They hate them. No one feels pity for these people who sell their souls. They feel ill will, disgust. But it's not the right emotion. It's not the right feeling to have towards somebody who is doing what they believe is best in the matter of the most importance, the pursuit of happiness. But everyone believes it's better to do wrong than to be wronged. Now, if you ask somebody which is better, I don't believe they will tell you what I just said. But if you put them in a situation, they will believe the person who did wrong is in a better position. The person who murders somebody, people would believe is better off than the person who was murdered. But if you ask them the question I just asked, they will say the person who was murdered is better off than the person who murdered. Because if the person who was murdered somebody, they would be tainted forever. And there'd be no way you'd want to live. And their conscience would be ruined. And I'm sure if they were a sound, just person, they would rather die than commit murder. So when the question is put like that, people act virtuous. But when the real life example is presented, no one acts virtuous. No one pities the murderer. They pity the murdered. And it's a slippery slope indeed, because there should be justice. But there shouldn't be justice with hate. There should be justice with the hope that future crimes of that nature will not be committed because people will be deterred by the penalty they would have to pay if they committed a crime of that nature. But the justice should not be served with hate. It should be served with pity, and it should be served trying to help the person who is deprived of the truth in matters of utmost importance. Matters of the utmost importance. This is what happened to Socrates. When Socrates was put on trial for false accusations, the first thing he said to his jury was, "This trial is more for you than me." Because Socrates knew that he did nothing wrong. Socrates knew that he was the least worthy person of exile or death. And he said, "This trial is more about you than me. For if I'm done wrong, it isn't me who suffers. It is the wrongdoer, the jury, who will suffer from falsely accusing a just man of an unjust action." And, the jury didn't like that. And that's probably, Socrates didn't really. Socrates, let's just say, did not play to the crowd when he was on trial. And I believe that was intentional. It was intentional, and it was also to prove a point that exile wasn't bad, that death wasn't bad, but how you bear it. And to lose your virtue in the fear of exile or death is worse off than dying. That is what Socrates wanted to prove. And we may not even be talking about Socrates today if he did not die the way he died. He trusted that it was for the best. And now Socrates breeded a Plato, Plato breeded an Aristotle, and those three breeded every philosopher the last 2,500 years. Every philosopher the last 2,500 years, I can almost guarantee you, they knew either Socrates, Plato, or Aristotle. And I'd be surprised if they didn't know all three. And they knew their works, and they knew their takes, and they knew what they believed in. And if not that, at least the names, and at least the lives, especially of Socrates. Cynicism came from them, and so did Stoicism, so did skepticism, everything. But back to the point, the wise man has no room for hate inside of him, for the reason of all the points that I just laid forward. He doesn't view a sick mind as something to be hated. He views it as something that is to be pitied, because he would imagine how he himself would feel if he was partaking in those actions, and how his conscience would berate him, and how he could not live a happy life with exalting so much vice and discarding so much opportunities for virtue. Now, just to be clear, I am not wise, so I'm not standing on a pedestal right now, but I believe everything I just said.